Welcome back to the Question Table. The Question Table is a podcast of the Way Home Ministries, and I am your host, Sylvia Geronimo. Some questions don't show up loudly. They actually arrive quietly, usually right in the middle of a moment when your body already knows the answer. You might relate to those moments when your chest starts feeling tight and there's a knot in your stomach. And in those moments, you find that you are pausing, maybe pausing before you send that text, pausing before you speak that truth, or you take that step, or even pausing to stay when leaving would be easier. And that's where today's question comes from. And here's the question. When was the last time you were brave? I'm not talking about the kind of brave that looks impressive from the outside, but the kind that happens when your hands are shaking and you move forward anyway. I'm talking about the kind of brave that doesn't make headlines, but changes something inside of you. So when was the last time you were brave? Not heroic or impressive and not fearless, just brave. And before we go any further, I want to slow us down because this question can quietly turn into a performance question if we are not careful. We can start reaching for moments that look bold and confident and decisive. And I know that those moments photograph well, but that's not actually where I want us to go. Because this episode really isn't about bravery. It's about courage. And those two are not the same thing. So let me set the ground here as we look at the difference between courage versus brave. Let me start by reading these definitions out loud because I believe that words matter, and the way we define them can shape the way we live, and often does. So let's start with courage. Courage is action despite fear. It's a conscious decision to move forward even when you're scared. Therefore, courage is a long game marathon. It will require processing and enduring and staying. Courage is also driven by purpose, and this purpose is rooted in the values that we hold, in the principles that we believe in, and also in those causes that we deem as worthy. And therefore, because it is driven by purpose, it often requires moral courage, emotional courage, and even spiritual courage. The word courage comes from the French word cœur, or heart. Courage is therefore heartfelt conviction. So courage in action despite fear. Now let's listen to the difference in bravery. Bravery is often described as courage without fear. Those moments where we find ourselves acting boldly and confidently and sometimes even impulsively, especially in dangerous situations. And therefore, bravery can be instinctive, it can be a quick hit response, those moments that are adrenaline surging moments in our lives. And therefore, bravery can actually sometimes lack purpose because it can be driven by external rewards, such as recognition. It can be driven by peer pressure or even by a dare. The word brave comes from bravo, and it actually means bold or wild or even savage. So let's hear this clearly though. Bravery is not bad, but bravery isn't sustainable. Courage is. Now, why does this question matter? So let's ask the question again. When was the last time you were brave? Because most of us have been taught explicitly or subtly that fear disqualifies us. That if we were really faithful and really mature and really confident, then we wouldn't be scared. But courage actually tells a different story. Courage says that fear is not the enemy, but paralysis is. Courage invites us to name our fear and take it seriously, and then keep moving anyway. And this question helps us uncover what we believe about fear and about faith and strength and obedience. And therefore, it reveals something even deeper. What do we think God expects of us when we're afraid? Which brings me to want to say a word about confidence. Throughout my adult life, I've often been commended for being confident. And I have to say that sometimes I am. But I can tell you that there have been many moments, more than I can actually count, when my outward confidence was doing a lot of heavy lifting. There were moments when I was saying the words and I was taking the steps and making the decisions, and all the while my knees were shaking, literally. My stomach was turning and my palms were sweaty. And here's what I want to say clearly, especially if this resonates with you. That wasn't hypocrisy. I believe that was courage. I kept moving forward even though I was scared. And I often pray scared, and I decide scared. And that matters because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's obedience in the presence of it. Scripture does have something to say about courage. I'm going to read you a couple of scriptures, passages, verses that you can look at yourself. But here's the first one. John 14:1 says this: "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in me, believe also in God." So that's Jesus encouraging us to not allow our hearts to be troubled. And therefore, this verse doesn't deny trouble, it speaks directly to it. And here's another one. This is the Apostle Paul speaking to his disciple Timothy. In 2 Timothy 1:7, it says this: "God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." So notice here what that does not say. It doesn't say that we won't feel fear. It says fear does not get the final word, but power, love, and a sound mind, they get the final word. And those are words of courage. Let me give you also an example of a children's book that I absolutely love. You might have read it, you might own it, and if you don't, you need to own it and read it. And the book is called The Boy, the Mole, the Horse, and the Fox. Charlie Mackey understands courage in a way that feels gentle and true. And one of my favorite moments in The Boy, the Mole, the Horse, and the Fox is when the boy asks this question. He says, "What's the bravest thing you've ever said?" And the horse answers, "Help." That, my friends, is courage. It's not bravado, it's not self-sufficiency, and it's not powering through. It's just to say, "Help." And I love this other line that belongs here in our discussion too. This line goes like this: "Sometimes just getting up and carrying on is brave and magnificent." And I say yes to that, especially in those moments when you feel tired and you are carrying the load of disappointment, especially when the story didn't turn out the way you had hoped. And maybe this then is also my favorite little page in this book, and it says, "You are loved," said the boy, and that changes everything. Because it makes me think that courage rooted in love is different than courage rooted in fear of failure. So scripture, beautiful books like this, they invite us to take heart. And taking heart is to have the courage to both believe in God and to receive the Spirit that He has given us, to keep moving forward despite our fear. To take heart is to align our heart with His. I have this picture in my mind that I literally take my heart in my hands, and maybe that heart in that moment is full of fear, it's full of hesitation, it's exhausted, and it has some vestiges of doubt. And I take it all and I place it in His hands. And then this is the image that stays with me, that Jesus takes my heart and places it into His chest, into His heart, and there His heart and mine meet. And from that place, I'm filled with power and love and a sound mind. Not because I suddenly feel fearless, but because I am no longer alone. And from that place, I am encouraged. I'm filled up with courage again. I'm strengthened and covered, and that's why I can take the next step. And maybe it's not the 10 steps I want to take right away, but it's just one, the next one, because each step becomes a co-step. I am stepping with the Spirit. So when we ask, when was the last time you were brave? What we are really asking is, where have I been afraid lately? What have I been tempted to avoid or delay or even abandon? And what is my fear protecting? What might courage invite me into? Because friends, here's the truth. Where we know we can't, God can and does. You know, not long ago, I watched something that stopped me in my tracks. Netflix aired a live special called Skyscraper Live, where Alex Honnold, the same climber many of us first met in the documentary Free Solo, he did something almost unthinkable. He free solo climbed Taipei 101 with no ropes, no safety gear, just him and his body, and 1,667 feet of vertical skyscraper beneath him, 101 floors, and he reached the top in about 90 minutes. Now, I remember watching Free Solo years ago when he climbed El Capitan in the Yosemite Park, nearly 3,000 feet of sheer rock, again without a rope. And that film left many of us holding our breath. This time, watching it live, I felt the same tension in my body. My palms were sweaty just sitting on the couch, and it struck me, this is what we often picture when we talk about bravery. It's big, it's visible, it's edge of your seat moments that make the rest of us say, ugh, I could never do that. And thank goodness I never have to do that. But sometimes I'm scared to do the things I can do and have to do. Sometimes courage looks like doing the thing scared rather than waiting to feel ready. I would rather believe and move and decide and act scared than not at all. I want to leave you with this line from the Apostle Paul. In 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 to 18, it says, "Therefore, we do not lose heart." Courage is how we don't lose heart. Not by pretending fear isn't there, but by refusing to let it drive you, to let it get hold of your life. So let me ask you again, gently, when was the last time you were brave? And what if the answer isn't a big moment, but a quiet one? A prayer whispered through a lump in your throat, a conversation you didn't want to have, but you did, a boundary you finally held, a step you took while shaking. That counts. That matters. And that's courage. And courage, rooted in love, held by God, and practiced one step at a time, is enough. Friends, carry this question gently. Let it shape your awareness and your conversations. And let it also shape the way you see God's goodness woven through your days. Until next week, take heart.